He was a homeless veteran who had lost everything: his brothers, his purpose, his belief that the world could still surprise him. Then he inherited nothing but a rusty storage unit in a town he'd never heard of. What he found inside didn't just change his life. It made him question whether he'd ever really been lost at all. If you've ever felt like the world forgot you existed, stay with me. This story is proof that second chances sometimes come disguised as dead ends. The air in the VA benefits office smelled of industrial cleaner and waiting. It was the smell of bureaucracy, of forms processed and hopes deferred. I sat in a molded plastic chair, the kind designed to discourage comfort, and watched the digital clock on the wall count backward from my appointment time. My name is James Cole. I was 41 years old and I had been invisible for 3 of them. Not literally, of course. People saw me. They saw the worn army jacket, the boots held together with duct tape, the duffel bag that contained everything I owned. They saw me on street corners, in shelter lines, in the background of their morning commute. They just didn't see me. The way you don't see the air conditioning unit humming outside your window, or the fire extinguisher mounted by the elevator. I had stopped expecting to be seen 3 years ago when the discharge paperwork came through and the world I'd known for 18 years simply ended. No ceremony, no transition. Just a folder of benefits information and a handshake from a major who wouldn't meet my eyes. The woman at the desk called my number. I approached with the automatic posture drilled into me at Fort Bragg, shoulders back, chin level, eyes forward. Old habits. They don't teach you how to shed them. Mr. Cole, she said, not looking up from her screen. Your disability claim has been denied pending additional documentation. However, we did receive correspondence from a probate attorney in your name. She slid an envelope across the counter. Heavy stock, the kind that costs extra. My name typed on the front in a font that suggested professionalism and bad news. Your uncle, Silas Cole, he passed 6 months ago. The attorney has been trying to locate you. I stared at the envelope. I had no Uncle Silas. My father was an only child. My mother had mentioned a distant cousin once, a man who lived in the mountains somewhere, but we'd never met. He was family in the way that dust is furniture, technically related, practically irrelevant. There's no next of kin, the woman continued. According to the will, you're the sole beneficiary. It's not, she paused, choosing words. It's not a substantial estate, but you're required to claim it in person. Marietta, Georgia. The storage facility lease expires in 60 days. She handed me a second envelope, thinner, legal-sized, containing a key. Old brass, tarnished green, attached to a tag with the number 847 written in faded marker. That's it. That's the entirety of the tangible estate, yes. There's also a letter. The attorney instructed it be delivered with the key. I walked out into the October afternoon. Atlanta's humidity wrapped around me like a wet blanket, but I barely felt it. I was holding a key to a dead man's junk, a letter from a stranger, and a deadline I couldn't afford to meet. I had $23 in my pocket. No vehicle. A shelter bed that would be given away if I didn't claim it by 6 p.m. And now I had a destination. Marietta, Georgia, 4 hours north. A storage unit full of God knows what that I had to clear in 60 days. I didn't know it yet, but that key was about to unlock every door I'd been too broken to open. The bus to Marietta cost $37. I panhandled for 2 hours outside the Greyhound station, standing at an intersection where the light took forever to change. Holding a cardboard sign that read, "Veteran, anything helps," most people looked through me. A few looked away. One man in a pickup truck threw a half-empty soda cup that splattered my boots, but a woman in a Prius rolled down her window and handed me 2 20s. No eye contact. Just the money and the electric window rising back up. I bought the ticket with $3 left for coffee. The bus was half empty, smelling of diesel and distant restrooms. I took a window seat and finally opened the letter. James, if you're reading this, I'm dead and you're probably wondering who the hell I am. Fair question. I'm your father's brother. The one nobody talked about. The one who went strange after Vietnam and moved to the woods to build conspiracy theories. I wasn't strange. I was careful. And I was right about more than they ever knew. Your father and I didn't speak for 40 years. He thought I was embarrassing the family. I thought he was too scared to see what was coming. We were both right, both wrong, and now we're both dead. Him from the heart attack, me from the cancer. You from whatever got you discharged and put you on that bus. I watched you, James. Not in a creepy way. In a I have resources and no heirs way. I know about the Rangers. I know about the discharge. I know about the nights you've spent in shelters and the days you've spent pretending you're just between jobs. The storage unit contains everything I built in 50 years of preparing for a world that hasn't arrived yet. Or maybe it has, and you're reading this in the middle of it. Either way, it's yours now. The tools, the records, the equipment, the responsibility, don't sell it. Don't ignore it. Don't let the facility throw it away when the lease expires. What's in there matters more than money. It matters more than comfort. It might matter more than your life, depending on how things go. I'll stop being cryptic. The unit contains documentation of crimes, corporate, governmental, the kind that get people killed when they talk about them. I spent decades collecting evidence of systematic poisoning, of cover-ups, of experiments conducted on populations who didn't know they were subjects. Your father thought I was crazy. The files will show you I wasn't. They'll also show you why I had to disappear, why I couldn't contact you directly, why I'm leaving this to you from beyond the grave like some gothic novel cliché. There's money too. Not enough to be happy, but enough to be secure while you decide what to do with the truth. Buried in the unit, literally. You'll find it. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. I'm sorry I let your father's shame become my silence. I thought I was protecting you by staying away. Maybe I was. Maybe I was just protecting myself. You have a choice now that I never had. You can open the files, learn what I learned, and decide whether to act. Or you can take the money, sell the equipment, and pretend this letter never arrived. I know which choice you'll make. You're a ranger. You don't know how to walk away from a fight even when walking away is the smart move. Be smart, James, but be brave too. The world needs more brave men who know how to be smart about it. Your uncle, Silas, I read the letter 3 times. The bus swayed through Georgia pine forests, the afternoon light slanting gold through the windows, and I held a dead man's paranoia in my hands. Conspiracy theories, corporate crimes, buried money. It was the kind of story homeless men told each other at shelter dinner tables. The secret inheritance, the hidden truth, the relative who turned out to be important after all. I'd heard a dozen variations. I'd never believed any of them, but I believed Silas. Not because his claims were credible, though the specificity of his language suggested more than delusion, but because of what he knew about me, the Rangers, the discharge, the shelters. Someone had been watching, documenting, preparing. The bus deposited me in Marietta at dusk. The town was strip malls and church spires, the architecture of anywhere America. I walked 2 miles to the address on the attorney's letter, my duffel cutting into my shoulder, the key heavy in my pocket. Stockbridge Secure Storage squatted behind a Waffle House, a grid of corrugated metal buildings painted in fading earth tones. The office was closed, but a note on the door gave me the gate code, 847, the same as the unit number, and instructions to find your space, respect the property. Out by 10 p.m., the facility was half full, half forgotten. I walked down rows of identical doors, each one representing someone else's deferred decisions. There, I'll deal with it later. There, I can't throw that away yet. The air smelled of rust and pine needles, of time passing slowly in the dark. Unit 847 was at the back, near a chain-link fence overgrown with kudzu. The door was more rust than paint, the color of dried blood. The lock was modern, but the key in my pocket was old, a skeleton key that seemed designed for a different century. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. The key wouldn't fit. The inheritance was a joke, a final cruelty from a man I'd never met. Then I noticed the hasp. The modern lock was a decoy, loosely attached. Behind it, barely visible in the failing light, was an older mechanism, a keyhole the right size for what I held. The skeleton key turned smoothly. The lock snapped open with a sound like a bone breaking. I gripped the rolling door and heaved. The smell hit me first, not rot, not decay, but something stranger. Machine oil, paper. The particular mustiness of electronics stored in humid air. And underneath it all, something metallic and sharp that I couldn't identify. I found the light switch. A single bulb flickered to life, revealing a space that had been transformed into something between a workshop and a war room. The unit was organized with military precision. Against the left wall, a workbench held equipment I didn't recognize. Radio components, signal analyzers, devices that looked like they'd been built from kits and modified extensively. Above them, pegboards displayed hand tools, each one outlined in marker so its absence would be noticed. The right wall was shelving, floor to ceiling, filled with plastic storage bins. Each was labeled in the same precise handwriting as the letter: Monsanto 1987-1994, DuPont groundwater, CDC whistleblower files, Fort Detrick. And in the center, where the light fell strongest, sat a large wooden chest bound with iron straps. A modern padlock secured it, but there was a second keyhole beneath, older, waiting for the skeleton key's twin. I stepped inside. The door rolled down behind me, sealing me in with my uncle's legacy. I started with the shelves. The first bin I opened contained newspaper clippings, hundreds of them, organized by date and location. Chemical spill in West Virginia, birth defects in agricultural communities, cancer clusters near military bases. The articles were yellowed, fragile, but the patterns were clear. SEALAs had been tracking environmental disasters for decades, connecting dots that the original reporters hadn't seen. The second bin held photographs, aerial shots of industrial facilities, taken with long lenses from public roads. Close-ups of drainage pipes, of warning signs, of workers in inadequate protective gear, and portraits, dozens of them, faces labeled with names and dates. Eileen Marsh, 1952-1998, lymphoma. Lived 0.4 miles from DuPont plant. Thomas Blackwood, 1961-2005, multiple myeloma, Army base water supply. These were SEALA's subjects. The people he'd documented, the lives he'd traced from health to sickness to death. Each photograph was a data point in a larger pattern, each face a casualty of systems that continued operating. I found the money in the third bin, not buried but hidden in plain sight. A coffee can labeled screws and fasteners contained rolls of $100 bills, each bound with a date. The earliest was 1987. The most recent was 3 months ago. I counted $10,000 in the first can, then found 4 more cans behind it. $50,000. Tax-free, unmarked, accumulated over 36 years of preparation. I sat on the concrete floor, the money in my lap, and felt something shift. Not happiness. I'd learned not to expect that. But possibility. For the first time in 3 years, I could see a future that wasn't defined by survival. Then I opened the chest. The iron-bound chest contained files. Hundreds of them, organized by corporation and government agency, each one a meticulous documentation of wrongdoing. Internal memos acknowledging health risks while denying them publicly. test results hidden from regulators, payoffs to local officials, and names, executives, scientists, bureaucrats who had made decisions that killed people, then collected bonuses for their discretion. But the deepest files were different. They weren't about corporations. They were about programs, MK Ultra successor projects, behavioral modification research, testing on military personnel without informed consent. The kind of programs that officially ended in the 1970s but continued under different names, different agencies, different justifications. I found my own name in the fifth file I opened. Operation Resilience, 2019-2021, Special Operations Candidates, Pharmaceutical Enhancement Protocols, Long-Term Psychological Monitoring. The discharge I'd received, the one labeled personality disorder, the one that stripped me of benefits and reputation, wasn't the whole story. I'd been selected for a program I hadn't known about, given compounds I hadn't consented to, monitored for effects that included the insomnia, the anxiety, the sudden rages that had made me unfit for service. Silas had known. He'd been tracking the program for years, collecting testimony from other discharged personnel, building a case that crossed international borders and reached into the highest levels of military medicine. And he'd found me, not to recruit me. He was already dying when I was selected, but to prepare for me, to leave me the tools to finish what he couldn't. I read until the single bulb flickered and died. Then I sat in the darkness, surrounded by evidence of crimes I hadn't known were committed against me, and made a decision. The next morning I rented a truck with Silas's cash. I bought a phone, a laptop, a storage unit of my own in a different facility. I spent 3 days moving the files in batches, leaving the heavy equipment for last, creating redundancy and distance between the original location and my new base of operations. I didn't know what I was going to do with the information. Silas had suggested I had a choice, but reading your own name in a file of human experimentation victims doesn't feel like choice. It feels like obligation. I found an apartment, a month-to-month rental, no questions asked, cash up front. I bought clothes that didn't mark me as homeless. I ate meals at tables instead of shelter lines. The physical transformation was immediate and disorienting. I looked like a civilian. I moved through the world like I belonged there. But I was preparing for war. Silas had taught me that much, even from beyond the grave. I spent November learning the files. Not just reading them, mastering them. I created timelines, connection maps, profiles of the individuals named in Silas's research. I learned which corporations had merged, which executives had moved to which boards, which regulators had rotated through the revolving door into industry positions. I also learned about Silas, his early career as an electrical engineer, his work on military communications systems in the 1970s, his gradual radicalization as he discovered the uses to which his technology was being put, his divorce, his isolation, his decades of obsessive documentation. He hadn't been crazy, he'd been careful, and he'd been right. The program that had targeted me, Operation Resilience, was still active. I found references to it in recent documents, new candidates being selected, new compounds being tested. The same patterns Silas had documented in the 1980s and 90s were continuing, updated with modern pharmaceuticals and better cover stories. I could expose it. I had enough documentation to interest journalists, to trigger investigations, to force hearings. But exposure wouldn't help the other candidates, the ones still in the program, still being dosed and monitored, still facing the discharge and disgrace that would follow when their reactions became inconvenient. I needed to do more than expose. I needed to stop it. In December, I made contact, not with authorities, with the other names in Silas's files. The discharged personnel, the personality disorder diagnoses, the veterans living on margins who'd never understood why their service ended in shame. There were 12 of us in Silas's documentation. I found 7. 2 were dead suicides that looked more like overdoses in retrospect. 3 were institutionalized, their symptoms advanced beyond the program's expectations. 2 were functional, surviving, angry without knowing why. And then there was me. I met them in person, one by one, in diners and parking lots, and the kind of anonymous public spaces where no one notices veterans talking. I showed them the files. I explained what had been done to us. I watched the recognition move across their faces, the sudden recontextualization of years of struggle, the relief of knowing it wasn't their fault, the rage of discovering it was deliberate. We formed a unit, not official, not recognized, but real. 7 veterans with specialized skills, shared grievances, and nothing left to lose. We called ourselves the Resilient Survivors, reclaiming the name they'd given their program. Our goal was simple: obtain the current formulation of the compounds being used. Document the chain of custody from manufacture to administration. Identify the medical personnel administering doses without informed consent. Build a case that couldn't be dismissed as personality disorder or service-related stress. It took 3 months. We worked in cells, each of us responsible for a different aspect of the investigation. I handled logistics and coordination, using skills I'd learned in the Rangers to manage a distributed operation without central command. Others infiltrated facilities, cultivated sources, obtained evidence through means that wouldn't hold up in court but would guide us to what would. By March, we had enough: the current formulation. The manufacturing facility. The medical director who'd signed off on hundreds of non-consensual administrations. And most importantly, we had testimony, recorded, documented, ready for disclosure. We didn't go to the media, not directly. Silas had taught me that much. The media could be manipulated, stories could be buried, narratives could be redirected. We went to the inspectors general instead. Multiple agencies, simultaneous delivery, too many copies to suppress, and we went to Congress. A representative from Oregon, veteran herself, with a reputation for protecting service members from institutional abuse. We gave her everything. We made her understand that this wasn't historical. This was happening now, to people still serving, still trusting their chain of command to protect them. The investigation took 8 months. During that time, I lived in the apartment Silas's money had bought, working part-time as a security consultant, staying visible and legitimate while waiting for the system to respond. It did. Slowly, imperfectly, but it did. The medical director was removed. The program was suspended pending review. The compounds were destroyed. And the 7 of us, plus 3 more who came forward when the story broke, received formal acknowledgement that our discharges had been improper, that our symptoms were service-connected, that we were entitled to full benefits and back pay. I didn't celebrate. I'd learned that much from Silas, too. Victories in this kind of war were partial, temporary, subject to reversal when attention moved elsewhere. The program would resume under a different name. The people responsible would find new positions. The system that produced us would continue producing others, but I had the files. I had the network. I had the proof that careful documentation, maintained across decades, could eventually find its audience. And I had purpose. Not the kind the Army had given me: clear objectives, defined enemies, structured violence. Something messier and more durable: the purpose of witness. Of refusing to let the truth disappear, because it was inconvenient. I went back to the storage unit in January, after the lease expired and the facility sold the contents at auction. I bought back what I could: the workbench, the radio equipment, the iron-bound chest. The rest was scattered, sold to strangers who wouldn't understand what they'd purchased. I set up a new workspace in my apartment, not as elaborate as Silas's, but functional. I began my own documentation, not of past crimes, but of continuing ones. The environmental disasters Silas had tracked were still happening. The corporate cover-ups were still being manufactured. The programs that used people without their knowledge were still being designed. I wasn't Silas. I didn't have his technical skills or his decades of isolation. But I had something he hadn't: community. The resilient survivors, the journalists who'd covered our story, the congressional staffers who'd learned to trust my information. The network of careful, angry people who understood that visibility was the only weapon against systems designed to operate in darkness. I also had his example. The proof that one person, working systematically over time, could accumulate enough truth to matter. That inheritance wasn't just about money or property. It was about responsibility, about continuing work that would otherwise disappear. It's been 2 years since I opened that storage unit. I'm not homeless anymore. I'm not invisible. I speak at veteran events, at environmental conferences, at gatherings of people who have learned that the official story is rarely the complete one. I tell them about Silas, about the uncle I never met who watched me from a distance, who prepared for me without knowing if I'd ever arrive, who trusted me to finish what he started. I tell them about the key that opened more than a rusted door, about the inheritance that turned out to be obligation, and the obligation that turned out to be purpose. The money is gone, spent on the investigation, on survival, on establishing the foundation that now supports other veterans seeking answers about their own discharges. I live simply, work constantly, sleep rarely. The insomnia that the program gave me has never fully left. I use it now. The hours between midnight and dawn are when I do my best documentation, when the world is quiet enough to think clearly about its crimes. Sometimes I dream about the storage unit. The single bulb flickering to life, the smell of machine oil and old paper, the moment of opening the chest and finding my own name. In the dreams, I'm always afraid. In waking, I'm grateful for that fear. It reminds me that what I found wasn't just information. It was transformation. The world is still full of locked doors, still full of people who have been made to believe they're crazy for seeing what's in front of them, still full of Silases, working in isolation, preparing evidence that may never find its audience. I try to be the key for them, the one who arrives, who believes, who continues the work. It's not the life I expected when I enlisted at 18. It's not the life I was trained for. But it's the life I inherited, and I'm finally, fully living it. I want to stop here and speak to you directly. If you've made it this far, thank you. This story isn't really about conspiracies or secret programs or inherited money. It's about what happens when you discover that your suffering wasn't random, that it was caused, deliberate, part of systems that continue operating while you struggle to survive. That discovery doesn't fix anything. Knowing why you're hurting doesn't stop the hurt, but it changes your relationship to it. You stop blaming yourself. You start looking for leverage. You become capable of action instead of just endurance. Have you ever had that moment? The one where you realize the official story didn't match your experience. It's disorienting. It can feel like madness, but sometimes on the other side of that disorientation, you find community. You find purpose. You find that your survival has prepared you for something important. If this resonates, if you've ever been made to feel crazy for seeing what's true, I'd love to hear from you. The comments are open. This is a place for people who know that the hardest battles are the ones against systems designed to make you surrender quietly. Now, back to the story. I found Silas's grave last month. Simple marker, military cemetery, the kind of burial the VA provides for veterans without families. I brought flowers, lilies, which he wouldn't have cared about but which felt necessary. I told him what we'd accomplished, what was still pending. who had come forward, who was still afraid, who we'd lost along the way. I don't know if he can hear me. I don't know if the dead care about the living's progress. But I know that standing there, speaking his name aloud, I felt the connection he must have felt when he wrote my name in his files. The recognition that we were part of something larger than our individual lives. The continuation of work across time and mortality. The storage unit is gone. The facility is condos now, expensive ones with water features and fitness centers. I drive past sometimes, remembering the rusted door, the single bulb, the moment of opening that changed everything. But what I found inside hasn't disappeared. It's in the files I continue compiling, in the veterans I help navigate the system, in the testimony I provide to investigators who are finally, belatedly, asking the right questions. Sila's left me more than money and evidence. He left me a model for how to live, carefully, persistently, in preparation for moments that might never arrive. How to maintain hope without expecting resolution. How to work for justice knowing it will be partial, temporary, subject to reversal. I'm still learning those lessons. Every day I practice them. And every day I'm grateful to the stranger who watched me from a distance, who believed I was worth preparing for, who trusted me with truths that could have died with him. If you have a story about inheritance, of objects, of responsibility, of unexpected connection, I want to hear it. Share it below. Let's make this a place where we recognize that the things we receive, even from strangers, can become the foundation for who we choose to become. Thank you for listening. There are so many more doors to open.